Imagine a line drawn in the dirt, a boundary where civilization stops and a terrifying, vast empire begins. For 200 years, that line was moving backward. Families on the Texas frontier didn't go to sleep. They waited for the dawn, barricading their doors and praying they wouldn't see the smoke of their own barns on the horizon. This was the reality of 1858, a time when the Comanche didn't just live on the southern plains, they owned them. The Texas frontier was drowning, and the federal government had turned its back, pulling troops away to deal with conflicts elsewhere. Into this vacuum stepped a man with a name that sounded like an epitaph: John Salmon Ford. They called him Rip, a nickname earned during the Mexican War, because of the way he signed death notifications. Rest in peace. Ford was a doctor who had traded his scalpel for a Colt revolver, a man who understood that to save the frontier, he had to do what every military manual called suicide. He was tasked with raising a private army of rangers to strike into the very heart of Comancheria, a place where no American force had ever successfully operated. Ford knew that numbers were against him, so he sought out the only people who hated the Comanche more than the settlers: the Tonkawa. Driven to the edges of the plains by Comanche expansion, the Tonkawa, led by Chief Placido, were nursing generations of grievances. They knew the water holes. They knew the hidden canyons. And they knew how the Comanche thought. Together, this motley force of roughly 70 rangers and over 100 Tonkawa warriors began a 500-mile march into the unknown. Each ranger carried a secret that would define the coming battle, a new kind of firepower. They weren't carrying the slow, single-shot muskets of the past. They were armed with revolving pistols and repeating rifles. In the hands of these men, technology was about to collide with 1,000 years of tradition. As they pushed deeper into hostile territory, the tension was thick enough to taste. They were 25 miles a day through broken country, using cold camps to avoid detection, moving with a speed that brutalized both men and horses. Then, on May 10th, the scouts found it. A buffalo carcass with a fresh arrow still embedded in its side. The markings were unmistakable. It belonged to the band of Iron Jacket. To the Comanche, Iron Jacket was a legend, a chief who wore an ancient coat of Spanish mail that allegedly made him invincible to arrows and bullets. For decades, he had moved through the frontier like a ghost, a man who believed the spirits had granted him protection from death itself. Ford's scouts soon located a small outpost of 5 lodges on the banks of the Canadian River, but the main camp lay just 3 miles further north. Ford faced a choice that would determine the fate of every man under his command. He chose aggression. At dawn on May 12th, the sky turned the color of blood as the Rangers and Tonkawa burst from the tall grass. The surprise was total. In 10 minutes, the small camp was gone, but Ford made a chilling, calculated decision. He let 2 warriors escape. He wanted them to run north. He wanted them to bring Iron Jacket and the full weight of the Comanche Empire out into the open prairie, where his new weapons could do their work. The gamble paid off with terrifying speed. As the Rangers crested a low rise, they saw a sight that would have broken lesser men. A massive force of warriors was assembling, a crescent formation of dark silhouettes against the morning sun. Estimates suggest as many as 1,000 warriors were gathering from nearby bands, outnumbering the Rangers 10 to 1. At the center of it all was iron jacket. He emerged from his lodge, his Spanish armor glinting like a mirror in the light. His lance raised high as he gave a war cry that had terrified the frontier for 20 years. The Comanche moved in a controlled avalanche of horse and steel, a tactic perfected over centuries to create panic and test the enemy's resolve. They expected the Rangers to fire one volley and then scramble to reload, providing a window for the Comanche to close the distance and overwhelm them with lances and arrows. But Ford held his line steady. He waited until the charge was just 40 yards away before dropping his hand. The sound that followed was like the world cracking open. It wasn't the rhythmic pop of muskets. It was a wall of lead that never stopped. The repeating rifles and Colt revolvers created a continuous stream of fire that the Comanche had never encountered. Warriors who expected a pause for reloading were met with a second, third, and fourth shot in seconds. In the center of the chaos, Iron Jacket spurred his horse forward, trusting in the ancient steel on his chest to turn away the bullets, as it had done for years. But modern ballistics cared nothing for legends. Multiple rounds struck the chief, piercing the Spanish mail that had been forged centuries before for a different kind of war. The invincible chief toppled from his horse into the dust, and a psychological shockwave ripped through the Comanche ranks. The battle transformed into a sprawling 18-square-mile nightmare of running fights and individual duels. For 6 hours, the prairie was a chaos of smoke and screams. The Tonkawa fought with a desperate fury, settling ancient scores with knives and lances, while the Rangers maintained a disciplined, advancing line of fire. Even the Comanche women took up arms, choosing to die fighting rather than face capture, a testament to the existential nature of the struggle. But the arithmetic of the battlefield had shifted. Every time the Comanche tried to rally or reform, they were met with a sustained barrage that made traditional tactics impossible. By the time the sun reached its peak, the unthinkable had happened. The lords of the southern plains were in full retreat. Behind them, they left 76 dead warriors and a camp filled with the material history of their people, which Ford promptly ordered to be burned to the ground. The myth of invincibility had been shattered in a single morning. The Rangers had lost only one man, George Nichols, a teenager who had vanished in the dust of the pursuit. As the smoke cleared over the Canadian River, the world looked different. The Rangers had proven that the heart of Comancheria was no longer a sanctuary. They had demonstrated that the age of the horse warrior was being eclipsed by the age of industrial firepower. While the frontier wars would drag on for another 17 years, the momentum had shifted forever. The Battle of Antelope Hills wasn't just a military victory, it was a reckoning. It was the moment an old world met a new one and broke against it. 70 men had ridden into the mouth of an empire and emerged as the harbingers of its end, proving that even the most feared legends can be pierced by the cold reality of a changing world. In one morning, the Texas frontier was rewritten, not with treaties, but in the gunsmoke of men who refused to believe the impossible was permanent.